What's going on, you guys? This is episode 6 of What Comics Have Taught Me. Thor. This has probably been, a long time coming, as well as majority of the characters I have in this series. But specifically Thor and Daredevil was probably the two characters I was mostly interested of making a video on because two of them they're both in my honorable mentions of top 10 favorite comic book characters of all time. Speaking of comic book characters, go to my Instagram. I'll leave it down below. I made a poll asking you guys what new characters I should be getting into because I am in need of knowing about a lot more characters, not only on the Marvel side, DC side, on the Image side. I haven't even touched Image comics at all. Yes, I am pretty well rounded, at least for compared to most people when it comes to comic book characters in general. But again, guys, my knowledge first started with the movies and the animated shows and TV shows. It wasn't until like maybe 4 to 3 years ago when I started this comic book journey. But enough of all that. Let's get into this episode. So, first thing that the comic book character Thor taught me was you decide that you are worthy. The thing about Thor, as everyone should know, Mjolnir, which is how you pronounce it, not Mjolnir or Mjolnir or Mjolnir or whatever the fuck you guys say on the internet. Mjolnir is lifted by Thor's hammer, blessed to him by his father Odin, and only he can lift the hammer. Only he can lift the hammer. Which makes him, the only worthy combatant to lift the hammer. When it comes to Mjolnir, the spell is, if you are worthy, you will possess the power of Thor, which you can see there's pretty much less than a handful of characters that are able to lift that motherfucker. So when it comes to Thor, at first, a young Thor, he's like over thousands of years old. Young Thor pretty much realizes that he's the only one who's worthy. He is worthy enough for this hammer. And then later down the line in his story, he potentially loses the hammer. I'm not gonna say the reasons why, because go look for yourself, go do your own research. He potentially loses the hammer. He's not able to lift the hammer anymore. He becomes pretty much unworthy of the hammer, of his own power, which is crazy, right? But he will soon, regain the hammer, or he'll become so powerful to where he just uplifts the spell and, takes the hammer. And there's also storylines where he becomes worthy again. And it's a pretty, it's pretty, Thor's character overall really cuts deep when you really think about it and when you really, sit there and digest most of his comic books, which is exactly what I did when I picked this up. So when it comes to Thor, number one, you decide if you're worthy or not. Nobody decides your worth. You decide your worth. And that is a big lesson when it comes to Thor not being able to lift Mjolnir and just going on his own. He creates his own worth. He realizes that it's not what he's done in the past. It's not what he's done wrong that makes him unworthy. It's what he does when he does wrong, is what he does with those wrongs that makes him worthy. Same thing in a real life scenario. When you're going through a bad breakup or you're going through troubles or depression or whatever the case may be in your life, you are not unworthy. Those things do not make you unworthy. Nor do those things make you worth less. Is what you do during your worst, is what you do after being at your worst, is what makes you worthy. So only you decide your worth, nobody else. And only you decide if you are going to be worthless or you're going to be worth something. Only you decide that. The second thing that the Thor characters taught me is power comes from knowledge. Knowledge comes from wisdom. Wisdom comes from experience. Experience comes from just trying. we all heard the phrase knowledge is power, or Solomon, the most wisest man in the world, later figures out that all that power doesn't really mean anything. If you guys haven't really got into the wisdom of Solomon, go look that up. But power comes from knowledge. Yes, it is true that knowledge is power, but just having knowledge is not power. Is having knowledge and acting on the knowledge. That's where the power comes from. But in order to have knowledge, you got to have wisdom. Because if you just know everything, but you don't have the wisdom to analyze and digest and use your knowledge for the good, or for your best interest, is it really knowledge, or is it just delusional? But in order to have wisdom, you need to have experience. Having the wisdom to understand certain things, having the wisdom to know things, having the wisdom to know exactly what to say, what to do, how to act, how to voice your opinion, how to dress, etc., etc. All that comes from experience. It's really impossible. Excuse me. It's really not really possible to have that level of wisdom at the age of 12. It's really hard to have that wisdom at the age of 19. So even those, I'm pretty sure, I'm not trying to get deep into this video, but I'm pretty sure you see 25-year-olds on your For You page, rolling out in Bentleys, rolling out in Rolls Royce. Like, that's, let me cut myself off. That's a video for another day. But wisdom comes from experience. That kind of self-explanatory. And experience comes from just trying. You will not be able to gain experience. You will not be able to gain wisdom. You will not be able to gain knowledge. You will not be able to gain power if you do not try. And that's one of the things I like about Thor, is that he tries. He doesn't even know what he's gonna. There's a lot of times he doesn't even know what he's gonna do, but he still tries. Thor is not just this brute guy that you see, in a lot of iterations, but he's also not the brightest person in the room, simply because of how he is and what his nature is, and him being from Asgard, etc., etc. But I'm not saying Thor is dumb, but I'm also saying he's not smart either compared to like a character like Black Panther or Cap or Iron Man, etc., etc. But when it comes to power comes from knowledge, knowledge comes from wisdom, wisdom comes from experience, and experience comes from you just trying. Thor embodies all that. And the last thing that the Thor character has taught me is a quote that I'm going to use or steal from one of his movies in the MCU. A great king does not go looking for war, but must always be ready for it. And you can pretty much put that in any type of scenario, even in human nature. Once you get to a point mentally, emotionally, and spiritually that you do not go looking for trouble, you don't go looking for negativity, you don't go looking for like any heinous acts, but you must always be prepared to handle it. Because in life, guys, there's going to be people who do heinous acts. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be issues. There's going to be things you have to get over. There's going to be things you have to overcome. There's going to be hurdles you're going to have to hop over. When it comes to the character Thor, the first thing that his father Odin taught him is that if you want to be in my space, if you want to be on my throne, once you figure out this saying, a great king doesn't go looking for war. Do not become power hungry. Do not become obsessed with the war. Do not become this king who, now that he has everything that he wants, he takes whatever he wants. You must understand that in order to have that level of power, you also need to understand there's always going to be people looking to take your power. There's always going to be people looking to poke you. There's always going to be people who's going to test you. We can take this to biblical terms. We can take this to real life terms. We can take this to financial terms, business wise. never go looking for war, but always be ready for it. But that's all I got for you guys when it comes to Thor. You decide if you're worthy or not. Power comes from knowledge. Knowledge comes from wisdom. Wisdom comes from experience. Experience comes from you just trying. And a great king doesn't go looking for war, but must always be ready for it. Y'all take care.